All righty, we're going to go ahead and call the special Tempe City Council meeting to order virtually, June 25th, 2020. Tempe must reduce its spending in the fiscal year 2020-21, which starts July 1st because of tax revenues are falling due to the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The council will be discussing specific department proposals across the city that have been identified for a possible reduction in the general fund budget. Please know that the police and human services spending changes would require thoughtful, intensive analysis over many months. The council will not be making those decisions this evening, but has heard the voices of those community members who want to see changes made soon. With that, before we go there, give me 1 second. I gotta find a piece of paper here. I want to turn it over to Ken Jones, our CFO and Assistant City Manager. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ken Jones, Deputy City Manager and Chief Financial Officer, and Mark Day, our Budget Director, will be joining me in this presentation tonight. We provided you a lot of information in your packet tonight, but let me summarize for you what we expect to accomplish tonight. Tonight will be the first step towards reducing the general fund budget. We have to right-size the budget due to the downturn caused by COVID-19, and we must get on that process tonight and get started and identify some budget reductions. Mark Day and his staff, like I said, there's a lot of information in your packet, and it was put together in a very organized fashion so that you have a lot of information at your fingertips, but we also realize that it involves a lot of data that you had to go through in a relatively short period of time. So we're going to go through this as succinctly as we can. So we're going to discuss how we arrived at our proposed reduction targets, and we're also going to talk about the process we used with the departments to generate those proposed reductions so that you can see how this was all accomplished. In your packet, you also have a lot of public comments received via our Tempe public forum, a lot of comments that you received directly via the council communicator, and also comments from the employees to help you in your decisions tonight. And we've also included in your packet, you noticed, is a proposed listing of potential COVID recovery initiatives. So besides reducing the recurring budget in the general fund, along with the reductions being proposed, because we got the Arizona CARES Act, we will be receiving the Arizona CARES Act deposited into the general fund. We're also proposing some COVID recovery initiatives with the funding in the general fund. So at the end of the presentation tonight, we're going to ask you for your feedback on the proposed reductions. And we're also going to ask you for feedback on the proposed recovery initiatives. We're not going to try to balance the budget tonight. We're going to take your feedback on the proposed reductions. Depending on what you say, we will come back to you in your next meeting with revised proposals to still get to our target amount. So we'll do that. I did want to note that, like I said, this is the first step in reducing the general fund budget. It doesn't have to all happen in one night. And we also know that even when we get to the reduced budget that we are seeking, you can make adjustments to the budget throughout the year by shifting resources from one area to another as your priorities and your objectives change. So that happens every year, and it will continue to happen in the future. So Greg, do we have the PowerPoint? You can go to the next slide. You can go, okay.
Before we do that, I got to take number 1 first. It's the property tax one.
Oh, I thought, okay, I'm sorry.
Actually, I missed that. I jumped the gun as you speak. So let me 1 second.
Sure.
So the first item on our special meeting is to hold a second and final public hearing to adopt fiscal year 2021 property tax ordinance. And the first public hearing was held on June 11th, 2020. With that, I will look for, this is a public comment. Do you have any comments on item number 1, Madam Clerk?
For item number 1, no, Mayor, we do not.
Okay, so we're gonna move to item number 1. I'll close that portion of the hearing, and I'll look to my council colleagues. Is there a motion regarding the fiscal year 2021 property tax ordinance?
So moved, Mayor.
Moved by Councilmember
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Chin. We'll do roll call vote. Councilmember Navarro.
Aye.
Councilmember Keating.
Yes.
Councilmember Chin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Keeley.
Aye.
Councilmember Ardano Savage.
Aye, Mayor.
Councilmember Adams.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. That motion passes 7-0. Okay, Ken, sorry about that. I jumped the gun.
Thank you, Mayor. Greg, if we can get the PowerPoint up. So clearly the budget plays a large role in providing assurance of financial stability for the city. That's the council's strategic priority that it most closely relates to, and in terms of bond ratings and fund balance policies. Next slide, please. I just want to go over a few assumptions that we included in our strategy for balancing the general fund. We know that we are projecting that by the end of this fiscal year, we will only see a 1% decrease in revenues from the prior year. That's because our revenues were up 6 or 7% going into this downturn. They're declining steadily now, but we are projecting a 1% decrease. That's about 7.7 million less than was projected for this year. Next bullet. We also, Greg, next bullet. I keep saying Greg, I assume it's Greg that's controlling the PowerPoint. Okay. Also for fiscal year 2021, next fiscal year, we're anticipating a 14% decrease from another 14% on top of the 1% that we expect this year. So that 14%, we know that revenues are going to be down a lot more than that earlier in the year, and we expect some recovery later in the year. So we're sticking with our proposal or our projection of 14% decrease. That's another $47 million less than what we had projected. Those two numbers combined, we know that we're looking at $55 million less than previously projected. That's the number in the general fund that we have to overcome. Okay, and then fiscal year 22 and beyond, we do expect moderate growth again. That's what we anticipate in our forecast. And then another new assumption is we know that we got we will expect to receive in July $22.5 million in Arizona CARES funding, which will be deposited into the general fund according to the governor's orders to reimburse the city for police and fire personnel costs that occur between March 1st and December 31st. So we expect to get that $22.5 million in July. Mark Day is now going to go over some of our adjustment strategies on this slide. Mark?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mark Day, Municipal Budget Director. There are a number of general fund budget adjustment strategies that have been developed in order to reduce spending or provide additional cash to bolster the general fund balance. So tonight we're going to provide you a brief overview of these adjustments. So first, the city is entering the downturn in a strong financial position, and we plan to utilize the general fund balance that has been built up to spread the budget reductions over a 2 to 3 year period while keeping the fund balance within policy. Next, you can go to the next bullet, please. Departments have reduced spending in the current fiscal year that will generate approximately $4 million in savings. In addition, staff is in the process of seeking reimbursement from FEMA and other sources for eligible expenses incurred in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. Or next bullet point, thank you. The fund balance will be increased by $15 million by transferring excess cash balances from various capital projects funds, the OPEB trust fund, and eliminating the scheduled transfer from the general fund to her for fiscal year 2021. Next bullet. And as Ken mentioned, the city's portion of the CARES Act funding from the state will be deposited into the general fund. Okay, so I'm going to take a few minutes here to describe a lot of the material that was in your packet. So to reduce spending for the next fiscal year, a 6% reduction target in the city's general fund operating budget was established, and that equates to approximately $14 million in reductions. So to start this process, departments were tasked with identifying $24 million in budget adjustments, or 10% of the general fund budget. We asked departments to provide proposals greater than the 6% so that we would have options to choose from to meet the ultimate 6% reduction target. And the goal was for departments to identify recurring reductions versus one-time, knowing that we would have to make reductions in the next couple of years. Departments submitted budget adjustment proposal forms that identified specific budget adjustments and also the impact on programs and services. And these forms were provided in your packet of materials. It should be noted that some of the adjustments are not a reduction in budget, but an increase in revenue. So for example, the $20,000 identified for the Office of Sustainability represents additional grant revenue and not really a reduction in their operating budget. The proposals were prioritized into green, yellow, and red ranking systems, similar to the one that we utilize for the CIP process. And this listing is provided in your packet. So I want to apologize for any confusion in this ranking system. In our mind, a green meant go, that was a proposed reduction that should move forward with, but I think some people may have interpreted red would be the one that you would choose. So I just want to clarify that green is the go, that we would recommend that reduction. Yellow is not recommended, but would be the next level of adjustments that would be utilized if necessary, and then red is not recommended. So the criteria we used applied to prioritize the proposals into the green, yellow, and red. The primary consideration was avoiding layoff, and then next would be minimizing impacts on programs, services, and operations. The positions that you note in the greens, the proposals in the green, are currently vacant or will be vacated through attrition. This is a difficult task for us to prioritize, knowing that any reduction that would be made would have an impact on the community. The green recommended adjustments total $14 million, and then the yellow and red categories total the $10 million. So the green represents the 6% target that we were striving for. And as Ken mentioned, we did have a public outreach, so we utilized the online Tempe forum to seek public comment and feedback. We provided them the listing of reductions and detailed reduction proposals, just like you received in your packet. And the community was asked to respond if they agreed with the budget adjustments and to provide any feedback. And so this forum was open for a week. So we had almost 2,000 responses from the community, which I think is the highest that we've ever had for a budget topic. And the same information was provided to our employees via survey for their feedback and comments. And the results from both of those are provided in your packet. So in addition to the budget adjustments, departments had already submitted $18 million in supplemental requests for consideration. And these were submitted during the budget development process and prior to the economic impact of the pandemic on city revenues. So we are only recommending that 6 of these one-time supplementals, which total $2.5 million, be recommended for funding. So these supplementals represent those that had prior city council approval, result in cost savings or cost neutral. And those supplementals are listed at the end of your green, yellow, red listing. And then in your packet, we also provided a listing of the $15.5 million in supplementals not recommended for funding, as well as the detailed supplemental forms that explain each of those requests. And then lastly, we have identified one-time COVID recovery program and service initiatives that will be discussed a little bit later in the presentation.
Next slide, please, Greg. So I'm going to just give you a quick visual of how we got to the determination of how we need to cut. So this is a snapshot of what our projections looked like in February prior to COVID. You can see, for those who aren't familiar with this tool that we use, the left chart shows revenues and expenditures moving close together, where the revenues would meet the expenditures. We're slightly spending down fund balance, which is shown on the chart to the right, where we were intending to have a bit of a downturn and spend down the fund balance slightly. So I don't have control of the cursor, but so I'm not going to be able to highlight things, but you can see under recurring supplementals, kind of a rust color in the middle, we were actually adding, these are in thousands of dollars, so you have to add 3 zeros. We were adding $3 million in recurring and $3 million in one-time supplementals next fiscal year, and then 2 million of each in the second year, $1 million and $1 million in the last couple years. We were also going to cash fund some capital projects, and we were going to be able to add some positions on top of that. Next slide shows you what this same projection looks like with the revenues that we are now projecting and no adjustments to our expenditures. We clearly can't do this. We spend our fund balance down to way below zero. Revenues don't catch up to expenditures, so this clearly indicates we have to make some expenditure adjustments. Next slide. The things bolded and highlighted in red here show you the adjustments that are proposed. Now, instead of adding recurring supplementals, we're plugging in negative numbers there, where we're reducing by $16 million in 2021 the department's budgets. That's a net reduction, which would be net of any supplementals added. So it was actually closer to $17 or $18 million in reductions, offset by a couple supplementals, and then continued reductions in the next 3 years. But we were going to be able to get there. It was just going to be some deep cuts. What Mark talked to you about earlier, you see at the bottom, $13.5 million transferred into the general fund was going to assist us, and we were going to balance the budget in this way. The next slide shows the introduction of CARES funding. Now, instead of $13 million transfers coming into the general fund, we have another 22.5 added to the 13.5, and now we're at $36 million coming in. So you can see that the reductions to the departments are now a net $10.5 million. It's the 14 you see today, off 14 approximately you see tonight, offset by some of the supplementals you see tonight. So what we're showing here now is $10.5 million net reductions, and you see $7.6 million. That's the recovery initiatives that are also proposed in your packet. This also gets us to a balanced budget within our 5-year period. So this is what we're targeting tonight, and this is what we're moving towards. So we will ask you tonight about both the reductions and the potential for one-time recovery funds. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to read all of these, but the recovery initiatives were developed by a multi-departmental group that looked and said, what are the immediate needs in the community that we can address with the additional cash that was added to the general fund, balanced against some of the programs and services that are being cut or that we can save with these same funds. So they broke these into several categories. The details in your packet, let me just say that in your packet, you not only see these titles, but you see some details of what is being proposed in the initiatives. But even those details aren't completely developed yet. The dollar amounts that you see are estimates, and what we're asking from the City Council is, do these initiatives make sense? And if you say, yes, we like all of these initiatives, we would go out, flesh them out a bit, get a more precise budget for these, and then come back and say, in order to, and I'll use the first one as an example. This is under the category of domestic violence, physical health, and mental wellness. Increased shelter for victims of domestic violence has an estimate associated with it, but if you say, yes, we definitely want to pursue that, we're going to come back to you with the dollar amount that we think is absolutely necessary and the departments to which those dollar amounts would be transferred. So there, you can see there's quite a list of initiatives under the domestic violence, physical health, and mental wellness. The details are in your packet. Next slide, please. Under the category of homelessness and homelessness prevention, you can see the Envision Center on Dorsey, putting cash towards that. and then a couple of other proposals under the same category. Again, the details are in your packet. And then the next slide, please. Another category, economic recovery and workforce development. I want to mention here that because the Arizona CARES Act money is going to be placed in the general fund, it is now city money, which is unrestricted, and we can use it for anything that you could typically use general fund money for. We know that the Arizona gift clause restricts some of the things we can do. So we have to be somewhat innovative here. So if we wanted to have a small business grant program, we might have to find a third-party nonprofit who can help us with that. The staff has a really good plan to be able to make this work. It's the same thing if we wanted to do, say, utility assistance for individuals. We can't give cash to individuals and say, hey, use this to pay your utility bill, but we might be able to partner with a nonprofit so that we can funnel money to that type of assistance in that way. Next slide. Next category, equity-based revitalization and recovery, several proposed initiatives there. And next slide. So what staff is going to do in a second here, after you give us your feedback on the proposed reductions and any feedback you have on the proposed initiatives, is staff is going to go back and say, okay, there were 3 or 4 or a dozen things that the city council didn't like. Let's go look and see if we can replace those programs adjustments with other adjustments. Let's see if we can scale back the adjustment to make the council happier with what's being proposed. Is maybe we look at the recovery initiatives and say the city council has clearly expressed that this cut is valuable to the community. They don't want to make that cut. Maybe it's more valuable than the recovery initiative that's being proposed. So we take some of that funding and move it to save that project. So this is really a balancing act between what valuable programs and services can we save and what initiatives do we want to put out there to also assist the community besides our current programs and services. And then of course, we can make additional reductions to fund the COVID recovery initiatives. If you had recovery initiatives that you wanted to explore even further, we potentially could make further reductions to try to fund more initiatives. So we'll go look at all of that, but all we want from you tonight, last slide please. All we want from you tonight is to give us comments on those proposed initiatives in green that will otherwise we will assume you're okay with, unless you say tonight, I have concerns with that, let me express what my concerns are. And then the initiatives, if there are any of those you want to call out and give us pros and cons on those, we're happy to listen to that too. So Mayor, we're ready for comments.
Thank you, Ken. And I really do appreciate that, Ken. And as you said, it's still too early to predict exactly how COVID-19 is going to impact the overall fiscal year 2021 budget. And we all know that there are other conversations that will be happening in the future regarding human and community services, as well as police reform. As you mentioned, this evening we're dealing with first with a 14% overall decline in projected revenues. We use a performance-based budget model, and as our priorities change, so can the actual goals change as well. And we are trying to measure those goals. And with the new goals, there'll be new initiatives and programs and a shifting of resources, which should be based on the need and on public's input. Therefore, I would respectfully suggest that any changes that need to be made with those considerations in mind be made after much consideration and public input, and that this evening the council really does focus on the already large task in front of us of really cutting the $14 million out of next year's budget, passed on June 11th. And staff has done an amazing job, and I'm thankful that we have a large fund balance that will allow us to hopefully avoid any layoffs and severe service reductions. They've done a great job in putting us ahead of the 8 ball, if you will. And I do want to mention that we do have, it's a special meeting and we normally don't have public comment. But for those on the line, I will take public comment. And for those that wrote in, I will make sure that if Madam Clerk, you could read those into the record. And I ask that you enter them into the official record if they're not going to speak. And I'll, before we do that, we'll take public comment right now and before I go to my colleagues. So I will turn to Madam Clerk. If you, I know you're looking at having some challenges with getting some individuals up, but I know that we are attempting to call them right now, I understand. And they may be watching on channel 11. So with that being said, I will ask you, Madam Clerk, do you have anyone on the line that's willing to speak to this item?
Right, Mayor. Genevieve Vega, looks like she's available online.
Okay, Genevieve. Hi, Genevieve.
Yes. Hi there. Good evening, Mayor, Council, City Manager Ching, City staff, and the Tempe community. My name is Genevieve Vega. I'm a Tempe resident, and I speak on behalf of the Tempe Community Council as Board Secretary and Co-Chair of the Agency Review Enhancement Committee to fulfill our mission of connecting those in need with those who care. TCC has decades of service to this mission, and we have an obligation to advocate for the underserved communities in Tempe. We want to ensure acute awareness of the crisis taking place from the perspective of the nonprofit agencies performing frontline human services to our most vulnerable residents in a situation made worse for communities of color, women, and immigrants. The city has generously funded agency review, and a reduction of funds in any amount would exacerbate the crisis many Tempeans face today. As you plan for your new fiscal year, we ask for the following considerations. Additional investments in organizations providing direct in-home services for vulnerable populations to help them avoid public spaces. Additional funding for net new shelter space in Tempe, and to begin an evaluation of existing city property that may be rehabbed and repurposed. An investment in resource coordinators for human services to strengthen access for those in need, and support for our human services system, which nonprofit partners are a part of, by leveraging CARES Act funds towards direct services provided to Tempe residents for these recovery initiatives that were mentioned today. The reasons for these requests are too numerous to fully report on here, but challenges center around mental health and wellness, shelter and housing, and basic needs. Everyone's challenged with changes to routines and access to needed services. For example, in-home care for our seniors and individuals with disabilities have been significantly limited, further isolating these vulnerable communities. Shelters are unable to take new clients after extending minimum stays, resulting in increased homelessness and risks associated with limited access to public facilities and hygiene products. And in a market already starved for affordable housing, there's heightened risk of becoming homeless for families struggling with income loss. Food scarcity and hunger is affecting all populations, and we're alarmed for our youth that are unable to access free and reduced lunches. And cleaning products, hygiene products, PPE, they're all scarce and experienced most severely for our vulnerable communities. Our nonprofit partners are performing exceptionally, but they also face challenges like prioritizing health and safety of their clients, volunteers, and staff, changing procedures, adopting technology to remain operational, and they face plummeting volunteer and donation support with canceled events. So now more than ever, our community needs your support. We're asking that you seriously consider these recommendations. We welcome additional dialogue. Thank you so much for your partnership.
Thank you, Genevieve. And next, I believe we have Katie Zeters. And Katie, please state your name and place of residence for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Katie Zeters. I'm a resident of Tempe, zip code 85282. I have been a resident of Tempe for 16 years. I'm a U.S. Air Force veteran and a college professor. I'm here on behalf of 285 educators, parents, and caregivers in Tempe who are concerned about police funding, and more specifically, the lack of cuts to police funding in the 2021 adjustment budget. We have delivered a petition to each of you via email. We're calling on City Council to make choices that improve the lives of children and families in our community immediately. Before I read the petition, I'd like to comment on the deflecting email that was sent to Tempe residents on Monday, June 22nd, and echoed again by the mayor at the start of this meeting. The email told the public that the meeting was not about police and human services spending, and thus could not address the voices of community members. The voices that were referenced, however, were the results of the City of Tempe survey entitled Provide Feedback on Proposed Budget Adjustments for Fiscal Year 2021. As you know, this survey that Mark Day referred to earlier in this meeting was quite conclusive. 1,787 out of 1,889 responses indicated that they do not agree with the proposed budget adjustments. So 95% of your residents are telling you that tonight they need you to not approve the adjustment budget. As detailed in the packet given to us by the city, the adjustment budget recommends only 5% reduction of the police department budget. Community and human services cuts are both 7% of their general funds budget. And for strategic management and diversity, cuts are 11% of their budget. If you moved the police department's red items to green, you would save enough funds to completely eliminate any cuts to community services, human services, fire, and strategic management and diversity. Tonight, you can take action. You could readjust the budget so that the police department faces greater cuts. So please don't dismiss our voices and do not issue joint statements right before a meeting that reinforce your unwillingness to address the problem. The time to act is now. So here's a brief, abbreviated version of the petition that was signed by 285 concerned residents. We believe now more than ever, our city budget and budget adjustments should reflect our community's values and needs. As you all well know, $98 million is to the Tempe Police Department. This is 3 times the budget of community services, 6 times the budget of community development, 8 times the budget of human services, 90 times the budget of strategic management diversity, 580 times the budget of sustainability. The budget adjustment cuts more funds in terms of percentage of budget from human services, strategic management and diversity, and community services than the police department. Tonight, we urge the Tempe City Council to do the hard work and not approve the 2021 adjustment budget until more funds are allocated away from Tempe Police Department. If you're eager to take action, as Councilmember Kuby stated, please no more deflection. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Kenan Young next. Please state your name and place of residence. You have up to 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Kenan Young. I'm a Tempe resident in 85282, and I come to you representing your Sustainability Commission as the chair. I'm excited to see that Jalen and Trinity earlier today that were awarded those scholarships both believe in climate change and agree that it is the greatest challenge of our time. With that, I would like to recommend that the Office of Sustainability's budget proposals are funded. As mentioned in the previous speaker, we are 580 times underfunded as it relates to the police department, as well as many other departments. The requests that are put forward to you today include the Climate Action Plan 2.0 update, the Sustainability Coordinator position, the Clean Energy Economy Plan, and the Energy Equity Pilot that were all developed to meet the requirements put forward by the city manager and reflects the bare essentials to ensure that we remain sensitive to these trying times we find ourselves in while maintaining Tempe's competitive leadership edge within the sustainability space. Today, now more than ever, our community is in need. These unprecedented times underscore the importance of our role as civil servants, and the Sustainability Commission remains steadfast to that commitment. We recognize that it takes a village and everyone is making cuts. We respect that and acknowledge that this is done in service to Tempe residents. With that said, with the support of the Sustainability Office has received so far, they have been able to generate $1.5 million in new external funding grants that have supported resources Tempe uses across the city, including the establishment of an emergency manager, the establishment of Tempe's first urban forest, and the completion of urban cooling centers and green infrastructure efforts. This work is being noticed from cities around the country. They have been calling Tempe to learn about what we've been doing in this incredible work. including Avondale, Chandler, Peoria, Scottsdale, Sedona, and Tucson, 2 cities from Nevada, including Clark County and Las Vegas, and Lexington, Massachusetts. We have something special here. This city council has put that in motion, and funding these budget requests ensure that we remain sensitive to these uncertain times while maintaining our leadership in this space. We are excited for the opportunity that our transformational proposals can make. And even though we have scaled our budget funding requests back, which is an 181% reduction what we had originally proposed, we really hope that this work can continue and help us gain to new levels. The last point that I would like to make before I conclude tonight is that within original funding.
Your time is up. Sorry. Can you wrap up in 1 second? Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. Our next speaker is Carrie Brennan. Please state your name and place of residence for the record. You have up to 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Carrie Brennan. I live in Tempe in zip code 85281. And I just want to again express my desire for the City Council to invest in budget items and programs that truly make Tempe a safe place to live. So I know that we have to make a lot of tough cuts given the budget shortfall, but I really urge you all to use these required budget adjustments as an opportunity to rethink our city's whole approach to investing in itself, not evaluating that, green, yellow, red adjustment with prior budget allocations, but really seizing on this unprecedented moment. So I took a look at that line by line budget adjustments, and I saw a lot of those line items for the police. Those were mostly cutting things that were already planned for, but maybe not even yet in place versus, that future spending. So I really think that what I want you to do and what we all want you to do for a safer Tempe is to see cuts to existing police positions so that we can really reallocate that money. And rather than just protecting baseline levels of investment in community services and human services, we're going above and beyond, and we're making those better invested than they were before. The previously planned for budget didn't have enough investment in those items to really reflect Tempe's values. So this is a chance for us to go and do that above and beyond in the budget. For example, as a city, maintaining services related to homeless outreach is really great, but maintaining existing services in this moment in time with coronavirus, with the recession, is not enough. We should be asking why we're not increasing investment in those kinds of services. So right now is our opportunity to correct those past budget priorities that were being shaped by really ingrained habits and ingrained interests. And I want my tax money. I'm a homeowner here, so these are my property taxes. I want that tax money reallocated from the overfunded police department towards the range of city services that actually make our community safer. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now turn to Madam Clerk. Carla?
Looks like we have Arlena Salceda on the line.
Okay. Arlene, you have up to 3 minutes. Please state your place of residence for the record.
Hi, my name is Marlena Salceda, and I have been a resident at Tempe for 8 years. I am incredibly disappointed in the adjustments being proposed to the FY 2021 budget. 2 weeks ago, you heard your constituents urge you to use this budget to reflect that you value this community. Since then, you received almost 1,800 public comments and survey responses from community members who disagreed with the $13.9 million in proposed cuts, who are instead asking you to cut 25% of the police budget. And yet tonight, you are voting on a budget that still includes over $90 million in general funds allocated to the Tempe PD. Police in the U.S. were created to protect the property of wealthy merchants in Boston and to patrol stolen and enslaved Africans in the South. Policing is a corrupt institution that was built to protect capitalism and enforce white supremacy. Policing brings violence and death into communities of color. Policing unjustly ended the lives of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Deion Johnson, Antonio Arce, and so many others. So many who had the right to not be deprived of their lives without due process of law. So many who committed no crime, who did nothing wrong. Please do not make your 8 minutes and 46 seconds of silence your recognition of Juneteenth, and your words of sympathy toward your constituents' experiences, meaningless gestures. Reflect your words and your actions and vote no on these proposed adjustments. The community is asking you. We are demanding you to adjust the budget to reflect that you value the community. Fund free pizza, fund affordable housing, fund transportation, after-school programs, mental health resources, social services, food access programs, vocational training programs. Stop funding violence and oppression. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Josh Bokopoulos.
Josh, please state your place of residence, and you have about 3 minutes.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yes, Josh, I'm from Tempe. Thank you. Yeah, I'm convinced that defunding and the abolition of the police is the answer. Reform has been tried and it has failed. Reform is it's another way to give police more funding, which in turn only entrenches the institution into our communities even more. So sure, yeah, we have body cameras on cops now, but now we can watch people be shot on camera. Abolition and defunding has to be understood as a process and a call to action, not some empty rhetoric, not a utopia. On this road to abolition are many steps. One such crucial step is to reduce the head count of police. For example, the removal of police from schools. Further, to call oneself an abolitionist is to want to abolish the conditions that subject majorities of people of color. Abolition means funding the crucial services and systems that many communities lack. For many working class communities in Arizona, the police are the only public resource available. This is unacceptable. To be an abolitionist is to grasp problems at the root. The root in this case being chronically underfunded social services, public resources, and police brutality. Another step along the road to abolition is rent control, safe housing for everyone, and the demilitarization of our communities. These crucial steps and many others would ensure that all of our communities are healthy, vibrant, and flourishing. In short, we must move to defund the police. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. I will now.
Next, we have Sarah Tacola.
Hi, please state your name and place of residence for the record. You have up to 3 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, this is Alex. Sarah was listed as an attendee, but she is no longer listed on here.
Okay. Next person, Carla.
I will attempt to call her as well.
Carla, next person. Madam Clerk.
Mayor, I don't see any of the remaining speakers that are online right now.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, there is Alexis Monty. She is available.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alexis, you have up to 3 minutes. Please state your place of residence for the record.
Yes, I'm Alex Monty. I'm a Tempe resident in the Broadmoor neighborhood and also a former commissioner on the Sustainability Commission. And there's a public outcry, obviously, to defund the police and reinvest in social services. Yet, the proposed adjustments to the budget do not even cut funding to the police at the same rate as cuts to our community and human services. So it's already clear that we're spending too much on an institution that is failing to advance and often undermines the safety and security of our community. So we, the people, want a dramatic shift in priorities. It's my opinion that Tempe needs to defund the police by at least 50% and invest more funding for crisis response for mental health incidents, de-escalation specialists for domestic violence incidents, community assistance for the homeless, and services for those suffering from drug addiction and addiction-related illnesses. We need to address root causes, not criminalize our most vulnerable populations. We need to send the right people to do the work. This must be addressed by the mayor and city council. You failed to address our concerns in your budget adjustments, so if not now, when?
And I ask, where is the leadership and how do you respond? Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Mayor, I'm not seeing our other speakers in queue, and with that, we can move on to the comments to be read into the record if you like.
We're just going to read the names, correct?
I can read the names, and they do have varying positions, so I can read one representative sample and the names that are similar, but we do have various topics.
Okay, and then after that, we will close the public comment. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, first comes from Abby Hemmings. She writes, Tempe City Council members, my name is Abby Hemmings, and I currently attend ASU as an undergraduate. As an ASU student, the City of Tempe budget affects how my college experience is transferred both on and off campus. Seeing as though Tempe police historically and continue to exercise their power disproportionately on people of color, I'm asking you to reconsider the large amount of funds allocated to them within the City of Tempe. An example of how funds might be allocated is to break up the police budget into appropriate response teams depending on the situation in which they are confronted. These might include mental health, domestic abuse, homelessness, etc. I'm asking that you set the framework for what a community-funded response might look like. Defunding the police allows for investment in the City of Tempe and the people that dwell within it. Thank you for your time. We do have some similar commentary, and I'll read just the names on these. We have Amanda Morales of Phoenix, Anna Miller-Smith of Tempe, Jamie Leland of Tempe, Catherine Sample of Phoenix, Samuel Gorman of Tempe, Sarah Hall of Tempe, Chanel McFallens of Los Angeles, California, Stephanie Funk of Tempe, Denise Mosso of Tempe, initials HM of Tempe, Jennifer Dewantry of Gilbert, Camille Johnson of Arizona, Anicia Groves of the Tempe Mesa border, Erin Bay of Tempe, Emily Masick of Phoenix, Catherine Haywood of Phoenix, Abigail Verdugo of Tempe, Meryl Darcy of Tempe, and Erzina Sokotaiva of Tempe. Next topic, flood control budget. Initial S. Dutton writes, I would be remiss if I did not send this email reminding the City of Tempe that North Tempe has been dealing with flooding for far too many years. There are many documents supporting this issue, from Maricopa County flood control to City of Tempe's own studies. There was the economic downturn starting in 2008, and now I am worried it will be put off again because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Please, this cannot happen again and needs to be included in this coming year's budget. Next item is from Jewel Valenzuela. She writes, we were contacted by Tempe School District, and to fund the preschool is $9 million. We all know that education is highly correlated with mass incarceration. Our community is asking that Tempe Council vote yes to funding preschool for our community. Preschool is where students learn resiliency skills that are carried on through adulthood so that they are successful. We are a voice for them right now because children cannot be out there because of COVID. We will continue to fight for children in our community to be able to attend preschool. Our demands as a community member of Tempe still are for reallocation from police to education, housing, transit, scholarships, youth programs, art, and after-school rehabilitation programs. Next item comes from David Sokolowski of Tempe. And he just is requesting that AED and other healthcare funding be maintained in the budget, especially in light of COVID-19 circumstances. And we have Jane Alfano Rossor, who writes, I support giving money to police, fire, and municipal utilities. These are the essential services we need now. It's not fair to do an across-the-board reduction. Some departments, example, police, fire, and utilities, are more necessary than others. Despite what has been happening nationally, I support our police department. The members of the Tempe Police Department that I've encountered have always been respectful, courteous, and helpful. I also support the Internal Audit Department. From my 35 years of business experience, I know how valuable internal audit can be in identifying mismanagement. To the extent that budget reductions need to be made, please reduce expenditures in the departments such as Sustainability Office. You do not need a separate office. Sustainability should be inherent in every department. Strategic Management and Diversity, again, why a separate department? And Economic Development. Tempe has very little land to develop. A smaller budget is appropriate. Just a few more items. We have one from Lisa Wakely, co-chair of Palmcroft Manor. She writes, I know I'm too late to fill out the budget survey online, and you aren't discussing police or human services at the meeting on Thursday, but I wanted to get my 3.5 cents in. Most of the people commenting on the survey are calling for a decrease in police funding. I don't believe 977 people speak for the entire city of Tempe. I am co-chair of a neighborhood here in Tempe, and college students, homeless, loud parties, and music make up a large part of the issues in our area. The same people yelling to defund or cut the police budget are the same ones who whine and complain that the police don't respond fast enough and want to know why there aren't enough police. Please don't take the response of the 977 people who fill out the survey as a voice of all the people of Tempe. My family and I hold the police, fire, emergency services in the highest regard and appreciate their sacrifice. This is not a case for the squeaky wheel or the people who yell the loudest to prevail. And we do have some similar positions to Lisa. We have Regina Bentley of Tempe, Nancy Brooks of Tempe, Kristen Maraglia of Tempe, Vicki Hadabaugh of the Phoenix metro area, and Brittany Walker, Phoenix metro area and patron of Tempe, Joy Nardini, patron of Tempe, Kelly Allen, patron of Tempe, Kimberly Gibson, patron of Tempe, the Marchant family, patrons of Tempe, and Mercedes, patron of Tempe. All cards have been provided to council in full via SharePoint. Representative samples have been read, and names supporting similar positions have also been read into the record. But again, full content is available to council. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I understand we have two last speakers, and it's closed after that. And they are? Hello?
Sir, one of them will be Hannah Hyman. I'm muting her now.
Okay.
I'm Hannah Heeman.
Thank you.
I'm Hannah Heeman. I've been a Tempe City resident all of my life. Tempe City Council is complicit in ongoing white supremacist violence against Black people and the community at large. By continuing to ignore the community's demands to defund and ultimately abolish the white supremacist Tempe Police Department, you have shown that you are more committed to upholding white supremacy than protecting the lives of the Black people and the brown people that live here. Vice Mayor Kuby said we need to set new goals for the Tempe Police Department. The community's goals for the department are that they should limit and stop all interactions with citizens, that they immediately reduce staff, and that they plan to cease operations entirely. We are imagining a whole new world. We will rebuild this city without you. We are better at protecting our communities. We are better at providing for ourselves. We will replace you. Listen to us now and immediately cut funding and staff from Tempe Police Department. Prove your worth to the community.
All right, Madam Clerk.
There's one more speaker, Mayor. It's Darlene Justice.
Thank you. Hi, Darlene. You have up to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hello. Hello, my name is Darlene Justice, and I'm calling you about Mr. Singh and Singh Meadows. Mr. Singh came to Tempe after we had had a meeting with the city and the neighborhood inviting him to Tempe. And we all know that there were things that he was going to do for us, like to have a huge Singh farm like he had on Thomas and Scottsdale Road. Unforeseen things caused that not to happen. And Mr. Singh has been a great ally for the city of Tempe, for our community, and for the whole valley. People come from all around to get organic food at Singh Meadows. He still brings food over from Singh Farms. He's invested a lot of money into the location His son, his wife, his grandchildren, everybody works at the farm and Sing Meadows. And I just hope that there can be some agreement with him so that he can maintain. I'm concerned that if Mr. Singh does pull out, the city of Tempe is going to have to again manage that area. We used to have a golf course there, and that is gone. And the golf course isn't going to come back in these days. So it's going to cost Tempe more money to manage that area without Mr. Singh. Plus, we lose this great organic farmer and entrepreneur and savvy businessman. He was very savvy coming to Tempe because Tempe is a great place to be, but he has had some struggles. And so I hope that we can work this out. If you need to postpone deciding what to do until August, that would be fine. It gives everybody hope in that. But I know you have a lot of things that you're working on, lots of concerns. But you also have some money to help keep businesses. This is a business that really matters to Tempe, and it fits right into our sustainability. It's right into wanting people to be healthy. And so I implore you to let's look at it. Let's have a little meeting or whatever we need to keep Mr. Singh and his family and his wonderful Singh Farms. They all during this pandemic, they've had people come by and they're delivering food to them at their cars in a drive-by. People have been buying boxes of organic food. Other people have brought things that they're selling through Sing Meadows so that people can have great organic food. But we need to help him. We need to keep him in Tempe. Thank you very much. Thank you for your consideration. Bye-bye. Thank you.
All right. Public hearing is closed at that portion. And I do want to thank the residents that called in and that were involved in the citizen survey regarding our budget. And I just want to reiterate my comments earlier that right now, what we're dealing with, there's going to be additional conversations that will be happening in the future regarding human and community services and so forth. And right now, this evening, what we are dealing with is first we have to reduce 14% overall in our budget. And I did a little research, and Ken can, and I know my colleagues have a question. I'm going to go to Councilman Adams. I just want to reiterate some things that we do. We're a caring, compassionate, and transparent community. We value the input of our residents, but we also are in unprecedented times. And we are moving forward. Since March, we've had to reduce $14 million in our budget. And moving forward, we're going to have continued dialogue and conversations with the future council, starting in July 2nd, to have a deeper dive in those conversations for our community. And as I was doing a little bit of research, in 2009, I know we had in our police department 575 officers, and today we have 508. And what is something that everyone has been calling for in emails, and what has been commented tonight, is exactly what we have been doing over the years. And we're going to continue to look at ways and be innovative to do even more. But with the reduction in the revenues and some of the stipulations that we have that are mandated by us federally, by retirement systems and so forth, I want to let you know, since 2009, we've created a human services department. We put school counselors in schools. We have a community counseling program for residents in our community that need that service at a reduced rate. We have created an urban forestry. We created the Office of Sustainability, and that was mentioned tonight. And we have a sustainability manager that we have hired. We funded and operated and continue to fund Care 7, our Hope team, which goes out and reaches out those that are less fortunate. We created an equity and an inclusion manager in the city of Tempe. That's something that was a goal of this council that we're going to continue to invest and look into. And not only that, we also provide transportation to youth in our community for that next generation, for those that have an opportunity to use the free bus passes. That's just a snapshot of what we've been doing over the years, and we're going to continue to invest, and I'm confident that the future council come July 2nd, we'll continue to invest in those quality of life amenities that we hold so dear and near to the city. And as I mentioned, this is some unprecedented times, and we are seeing a decline in our revenues, and we have to address the cuts first, and we're going to continue that community conversation with the next council. I can't stress that enough, and I really do appreciate those that have commented. There's a lot at stake for our community in this budget process. So right now, I'm going to turn this back over to Mr. Jones, and before I do that, I am going to look for my council colleagues. They actually have, Councilmember Adams has her hand up, so I'm going to call in her, and then we're going to look at the rest of the councils, and then we're going to try to move forward. Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a list of things that I want to bring up regarding our budget and suggestions that I have. I believe we are top heavy, and I think we need to look at downsizing our top heavy organization, starting with the City Hall. I think we could save a lot of money by reorganizing and downsizing our organization to reflect better management. As far as code enforcement goes, I think this is the last area we need to cut in our budget. This affects our neighborhoods and even the way our neighbors get along with each other. Our city is even more beautiful as a result of our code enforcers, and I don't think that we should go back and make that mistake that we made by reducing the code enforcement individuals in 2008. So I don't want to repeat that mistake again, and that was recommended also in the budget. So I'm disagreeing with that. The training funds, there's a lot of recommendations for lack of training funds, or I'm sorry, reduction in training funds. I don't agree with cutting staff training when we are cutting staff. We need our staff to be even more trained when we have so much less staff to do the jobs. The dive team for the fire department. I don't believe that we should eliminate the entire dive team. I think we could reduce staff, but not eliminate the program. It is critical that we are able to respond to emergencies at our lake and save lives. And that elimination does not seem worth it. The ambulance that service at Station 3, I would like to see that go forward and expanded. I know that the living quarters at Station 3 are very small, and that's a little bit of a difficult situation, but I think that there's ways that we could think outside the box and still expand our ambulance service there, and that also will save lives. And that's what's so critical with some of these measures. I'm not in favor of eliminating the encampment cleanups in our beautiful desert parks. They need those. They're desperate for cleanups, and to eliminate that at such a small fee does not make sense to me. I'm also not in favor of eliminating the park custodian at our Tempe Beach Park, especially when we are in the middle of coronavirus. Those custodians keep us safe and healthy, and I disagree with that elimination. And finally, there's a suggestion for elimination of a preventative maintenance person in internal services, and that is a critical position to saving the city and maintaining our facilities over the length of time and actually expanding the lifespan of our facilities while saving money. So that seems very short-sighted to me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Jennifer. And before I go to Vice Mayor Kuby, there's one thing I forgot to mention in my comments. And also what's recommended from staff is an additional $4.6 million in investments to address domestic violence, physical health and mental wellness needs, and there's other lists of items as coming forward to the most vulnerable population in our community. It's pretty extensive, including in that 4.6 million. And I also do appreciate what's being recommended, that $500,000 that we're going to be leveraging for relationships with our nonprofits in our community. Vice Mayor Kuby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to reply to Darlene Justice's comments, and I realize that we don't even, in a way, the funding for the landscaping and maintenance of Sing Meadows isn't even on the table right now, but I think it's really important, maybe in August 13th, if staff could come back and talk to us what the cost will be for not having a revised contract with with Ken Singh, I'm really concerned that we're going to end up spending more money that will be penny wise, pound foolish. So if it's the will of the council, I just like in August to hear what's going on, because we hear a lot of rumors, and I'd like to know what's going on with Sing Meadows and what we can do to maintain that relationship and maintain the requirements that we have with Maricopa County Flood Control to somewhat maintain that area. So I just want to throw that out there to the entire council. But I do want to speak to what we've been hearing about. A lot of comments, a lot of emails, and we heard that tonight as well. But we know that centuries of injustice and generations of organizing, so much individual community pain have come to a head in the past month. And what's long been clear to many is now undeniable to most, that racism is endemic in our society. People of color are dying at the hands of police, and we see trust broken between communities and the people charged with keeping them safe. We see that in Tempe. We see some community trust broken. But I think it is time to reimagine public safety. I'm not talking about abolishing the police, but I think we need to shift our thinking and our practices to decouple this whole concept of community safety from policing, and then eventually reallocate the resources to that new vision. So I know I can't speak on behalf of all of my colleagues, and none of us can speak for the new mayor and the new council member, but I can only speak for myself. But what I want to say to the thousands of people who reached out to us, and the petitions and the phone calls and the emails, and I just want to say that I hear you, and I hear what you're asking for tonight, and I know how frustrated you are that we're not proposing fundamental changes in our operations tonight. As Ken Jones has said, operations drive the budget. It's not the budget that drives the operations. So if we lop off, let's say we lop off 25% of our police funding, without a plan for actual reform, for actual systemic change, for transformed operations, then we're just giving a symbolic win, but it doesn't give you the change that you're looking for. For example, if you want to demilitarize police, which is a goal I thoroughly support, how does just lopping off 25% of police funding demilitarize the police? It doesn't. It basically would be a reduction in labor and just cutting more than half of our police force out of the budget. So what I ultimately hope to see happen is to work with our community, with those advocating for social, racial, and economic justice, not conversations, not community conversations, but to give the people at Tempe much more than what they're really asking for tonight. Right now, they're just asking for lop off, some people, I shouldn't say all, lop off 25% of the budget. That's not going to get us where we need to go. So I just want to, say to council and to our residents that, I think, why shouldn't we transition our response to mental health and homelessness calls from armed officers to trained crisis workers? I now see that assigning emergency calls to our officers is the wrong approach. And I think a lot of police would agree with that. Our city is poised to lead. We can truly reimagine what equitable and racially just public safety looks like. We can create lasting change in the community. We can take a thoughtful, data-driven approach. Even as we implement common sense reforms around transparency and accountability early on, there's things we can do right away. So I want to thank all the peaceful protesters here and across the country that have pushed this issue to the forefront of our public debate. Please don't go anywhere. You inspire me, and we need you to join with us, not just to reform policies and procedures. I hear you that sometimes we've seen that just reforming policies and procedures like in Minneapolis doesn't work. We need permanent systemic change. And I know a lot of you are disappointed, maybe even bitter tonight. And I've been very frustrated at how long it takes to craft policy. I wasn't a politician until I was 56 years old. I was an activist before. And it takes a long time to make a difference in the lives of our residents and communities. But I promise you, this conversation is nowhere near over. It's not just a moment in our history and the history of Tempe, our city, but it's a movement. It's not just a moment, it's a movement. And I'm intent on recrafting a police force that reflects our community, our values, and our needs. It doesn't put the police in places where they don't need to be. But we need to do it thoughtfully. We need to decide what our operations should be. We need to sit down with a new incoming mayor and council, and with subject matter experts like Poder and Action and Puente and groups that have been fighting these battles for years, and suddenly the voices are being heard. So just in summary, I just want to say I I know I'm just one of 7 on the council, but I am committing to the community tonight that this will be the first issue I raise when the new council is seated. And with that, I relinquish my time and just also ask if we have some sort of consensus to at least have staff come back August 13th about the Sing Meadow issue.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilman Navarro?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just want to echo, I think Vice Mayor Kuby, she did a fine job on stating, you know, the needs of change and where we need to do change. I also got to recognize Tempe's Police Department Union President, Rob Ferraro, for echoing those same sentiments, but also realizing we need to be effective at doing that. And I think Councilmember Kuby said it well when you can make a symbolic gesture of cutting funding, but what does that actually do? So the reality is we're working together and finding solutions to help policing, to take away areas of policing that don't really need to be in policing, put us in a better position. And I have to say, Mayor, you even echoed this earlier, this city has done so much in taking care of our human resources, our civic duties with helping others, with homelessness, mental illness, with advocacy services, with opioid addiction, with free pre-K for people under 200% poverty, and then a scaled amount of funding from people that can afford it to full funding for people that really can afford it. This is the city that only city, in my opinion, that actually put the money up to do free pre-K because of the studies done on how that can prevent people from going into criminal activities or into a situation where they're not bettering their lives, however that may be. And it also gives the ability for the parents to also get a job or get some income, get on their feet, and get them and provide them with services to get out of a situation where they desperately don't want to be in. This city has done so much for our residents of all levels, of all colors, of all diversity. This city relishes the fact that we are so diverse. And we're a city that has a major university that helps us, guide us through those challenging times. So this city, in my opinion, is in the forefront of making change and trying to push change. And we've been doing this ahead, in my opinion, of a lot of other cities around us. And that says kudos to you, Mayor, and your legacy, and to this council for what we're trying to achieve. And we have more to go. We talk about things of, I know this Tempe Fire Department is part of patient advocacy services, which is basically community paramedicine. And that's the starting point of really getting into someone's home to actually make a difference, not only on a medical situation, but on mental, on drug addiction, and finding them resources. We have a direct connect with our fire departments and our counselors and our ability to do telemedicine and talking to doctors, or even just finding transportation, which is the #1 downfall of any services, is getting people to the right help. This city is on the verge of expanding even that. So the services that we need to protect are the things that we need to start enhancing. I just want to say one more thing. Jennifer Adams marked some things or areas that we need to hopefully get back into the budget, and I agree with her on all those things that she's marked down, with including the fire department and the dive team. I also want to figure out with the Sink Farms and how we can support that down the road in August. I think that's a great initiative too. But there's another thing is with our AED units that are being also on the table and funding those. I know that those are under the fire department funding. However, they are not being, the fire department does not have services to take care of that. That's actually the facilities that has to take care of those AEDs. And I would like to see how that would be looked at if that was changed over. I know that's a burden on facilities, but at the same time, Those are things that are life-saving equipment that we need within our city. So I just want to put that out there, Mayor, and I want to say thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. All right, Councilman Aridano Savage and Councilman McKee.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity, and I want to echo some of the sentiments of some of my council colleagues and Vice Mayor, and just want to take a second to answer some of the questions and some of the feedback that I think have been posed by the residents and the calls for immediate changes to the budget. And I think one of the things that the city is renowned for is our conscious and deliberative decision-making process. I mean, this is really true when it comes to the terms of how we decide to allocate our resources. I mean, we have always been known for the careful and deliberate way that we decide to move forward. We pride ourselves, I pride us on being a transparent and data-driven organization. You know, we have decided to really put processes that allow us to move forward with purpose and purposeful intent. I mean, we are an organization that sets priorities first and then strategically manages how to get to those places second. I'm sure many of you kind of remember, but we began discussing our council priorities about 9 years ago, not long after I was elected. And we've had many meetings regarding the strategy. And 7 years ago, we consolidated the priorities down to our current 5. And in 2016, we created the Strategic Management and Diversity Office for a reason. And they have been tasked with ensuring that Tempe provides 21st century services to our residents, and that we stay true to and committed to our priorities and make sure that we're aware of those priorities that we're falling short on. And 2 years ago, after much deliberation, we introduced our performance-led budgeting in partnership with the Municipal Budget Office. So, you know, like I think Councilmember Navarro said, and you have said, Mark, I mean, we have a lot of really great innovative programs, and not only to help our residents and those that are less fortunate, but also innovative programs to make sure that our residents stay engaged. And we have the START tool, we have the Tempe Accelerate sessions, we do open data portals and various dashboards. And Tempe is a really transparent city and a data-driven city. And those are things that I think are really important. When we talk about, you know, I just don't think it's appropriate to have discussions on resources allocation when we really haven't truly identified the outcomes that we are looking for. And I don't want to pit one department against the other. That's definitely not what it's all about. But, you know, we need to be clear about the services that we want to provide and the outcomes we hope to see. So for me, it's not necessarily all about the money, but about the people and the services. We need to be clear about the services we want to provide and the outcomes we hope to see. Those are things that I think are really important and things that we can do well. And, you know, as city leaders, I take it super seriously. I know everybody else does. I know my council colleagues too do. That as leaders, it's our job that, you know, we ensure that people that live, work, learn, and play here can do so in a very safe way. And that we provide support towards those areas that promote that. And then that we also put a laser focus on those ones we may be falling short on. And I'm certainly committed to doing that. I know there's work to be done, like, you know, like Vice Mayor Kuby mentioned. And, you know, I'm ready to pull my sleeves up and get that work done and have those hard discussions and make sure that we are looking at the budget ultimately as discussion of priorities and then about allocation. So I certainly do support that and do realize too that we do a lot of things really well. We are a very fortunate city. I think Councilmember Navarro, you know, mentioned so many things that I'd kind of even forgotten about, and how receptive our employees are when we come back with a new idea or best practice from somewhere else and want to implement that within our community because we're so excited to see the impact that it's had somewhere else. And I know, Joel, we did that when we worked with the fire department and did CCR for, you know, all the sophomores in the Tempe Union High School District. I mean, that's pretty cool stuff. And things like that, and the paramed, I had forgotten about that great initiative too. So there are a lot of things that we are doing well, but doesn't mean that we can't do things better, and it doesn't mean that we may be falling short in some areas that definitely could use some attention. So I agree. I'm certainly ready to do the work, not afraid to do the work. I think that's part of our responsibilities and one of the most important things that we can do. And I want to just say too, based on, I know Ken is looking for more specific feedback on these green items that are in front of us. And And I've kind of went through it and I really tried to look at things from an operational perspective. I'm really worried about the way we do our methods of operation and making, you know, systemic changes to that without more data and a deep dive. And I agree. I think Councilmember Adams brought up some really good points. And some of the things that were kind of glaring to me, outside of what she had said, I'll go through there, was some of the things in community development. And we talked about a little bit earlier today about process and timing. We've always prided ourselves on being a business-friendly community, business-friendly city, welcoming new businesses. We just bragged about how many new businesses and jobs we've been able to create, but we need to make sure that process stays seamless and easy to navigate. So I did notice in there was like an elimination of the hearing officer. And when we put together our business process improvement working group, one of the things that was a recommendation, but it wasn't recommended. So I just was hoping maybe, Ken, you can kind of take a look at that, because I don't want to go back. I'd like you to just go back and look through the working group's notes and just see if those things match up. I just was a little concerned about that process and what that might do. And then I think that Councilmember Adams mentioned it too, and like a lot of those temp positions, the building inspectors and code inspectors, code enforcement has been a priority not only for the council, but for the community. That is something that we've consistently heard in our citizen satisfaction survey, is the importance of making sure that we're following through with code enforcement. So I'm a little concerned about losing our momentum, and I certainly don't want to do that. So, and then another thing too about community services, I hope it's okay, Mayor. I try to pull everything together as much as I could here. When it comes to community services, I mean, we do a lot of really great initiatives, programs, and recreation classes for our youth. But I really want to make sure that if we can look at it kind of holistically, and some of those changes that we're making, I understand if it's things that are happening in the summer because of COVID, those things probably wouldn't go on anyway. But if there are neighborhoods, maybe our vulnerable neighborhoods, that really benefit from having recreation classes or programs, I want to make sure that we aren't creating a negative impact or losing opportunities where there may not be others for some of those families. So I really just like to, take a little bit closer look at that. That would be really great. I think Councilmember Adams talked about number 29 in the community service, which was the reduction in parks and encampment cleaning. I mean, COVID concerns right now, I think we have to, keep our diligent cleaning protocols up. I really worry about that. And then line number 44, the Kiwanis Rec Center. I don't have an issue with it closing at 9 o'clock. I think that seems totally fine, but I'm super concerned about taking away Fridays, closing it on Fridays permanently. That's a little bit concerning to me. So hopefully there's a way that, we can kind of look at that a little bit more closely. And with fire, I think people need to be thoughtful of, what the AMBO services, bringing those in-house, have really done, and the benefits I think that provides to our residents. It's really just about customer service. And I think one of the unexpected consequences of providing our own AMBO services is we're able to break even and maybe make a little bit of money on that. And that's not what we're in the business for. But if there's a way that we can move forward and break even, I'm certainly willing to go down that road. And I do agree that the dive team, I feel like, we built the lake. We should be responsible for the lake. And if the way that, needs to be maintained is to have a dive team on site for our special events, which we're renowned for, then we definitely need to make sure that we're taking a look at that. And then also, I just want to make sure too, that when we talk about technology, we're not taking a step backwards, that we're always continuing to move forward. And I think we've learned how important technology can be and is to not only us as a city, but to our residents. So I want to make sure that we're continuing to move forward in that area in regards to technology too. And I know Councilmember Adams mentioned things about training opportunities. I do support that. I want to make sure that we continue to have the right people in place and the right resources to provide training opportunities as we move forward. So that's my 2 cents, Mayor. I do appreciate the opportunity. I just want to give a shout out to Ken and Mark and their team for all the work. I mean, literally, this is the biggest swing I think we've ever seen. 3 months ago, we were talking about a budget surplus and expansion of services. And today we're discussing what services to cut to stay afloat and to try to provide the best services. So thank you to the budget team and their work, and thank you to the department heads and the staff that, really came together to figure out, where they can pinch some pennies and really make a difference when it comes to the budget numbers. As we don't know what the future is, Mayor, you said that. And I certainly agree. So I appreciate the work. I just want to say thank you to everybody, and I look forward to the work ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Arredondo Savage. Before I go to Councilmember Keating, I just want to remind everyone, right now what's before us is we have to cut $14 million out. There's going to be additional opportunities after all the rest of the council speaks. We're going to go to Randy next, then Councilman Chin. Then we're going to look at some of the items that we could direct Ken Jones to look at for discussions in August. And keep in mind, whatever you want to cut, what you want to fund in the green, you're going to have to replace it with something in the red, in the yellow. So on one hand, if we're going to add something back in the budget, we got to make sure we have an opportunity of where that money is going to come from. Because what we're looking at correct right now tonight is we got to cut $14 million out of the existing budget that we have. And we're going to have future conversations on how we can continue to look at the budget and where reductions or investment and shifting of monies can occur with the new council. So right now I'm going to go to Councilmember Keating.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree with everything that my colleagues have said, with regards to the dive team and the ambulance at Station 3, and even the current AED monitoring contracts that we have around the city. Anything we can do about Sing Farms in August would be great as well. But I also want to touch on what Councilmember or Vice Mayor Kuby said. I think she actually made the point pretty eloquently about this is more of a longer term goal than merely cutting the budget by X number of percentage. It really is a longer conversation that we need to have as a community with our stakeholders and with our residents and with our police department, and figure out, I said it at our last meeting that I think we ask our police officers to do too much. And if there's ways we can reallocate and break up what we're asking them to do on a day-to-day basis and assign some of those activities to other members of city staff, I think that'd be beneficial. But unfortunately, and fortunately, government's a very deliberate thing, and it takes a while to turn a ship. And while we've started that process, it's going to go on for quite some time. And it's not going to be one set of changes or two or three. It's going to be an ongoing discussion. It's going to be an ongoing set of policy initiatives and reallocation of funds and responsibilities. And it's going to go on for years. But ultimately, I think we'll get to a better spot starting from the initial meeting when we start taking a look at these questions. So, Vice Mayor Kuby put it very well. I'm very supportive of what she had to say around that. And of course, what Councilmember Adams said about our fire department and concerns there. I know that, for example, there is there's some living space arrangements that the fire department believes they can do in order to make ambulance at Station 3 feasible. So, and I know that they're being a team player around, giving grants back to the city, knowing that, we're in dire straits right now as far as our fiscal situation. So anything we can do to make sure that they have the tools that they need, I think we should do. And yeah, and again, Sing Meadows, we got to keep Sing Meadows in Tempe, and anything the city can do to help Officer Sing, will only benefit us in the long run. So with that, I'd like to make a motion.
Mayor. Wait 1 second. Before I go to Arlene, I just want to make another comment before I get to Councilmember Chin. We are elected because we have to make some hard decisions that's going to be in front of us. And further cuts, and Ken mentioned this, further cuts are going to be needed to balance this budget. Not to mention the $14 million that we're addressing tonight. So everything we said, if you want to make sure that you want to save an item that's in the green that we've heard tonight, and I'm not disagreeing with anything that's been said, that in exchange for that, what are you going to have to cut in the red or the yellow? And that's something that's going to have to be determined at a later date with more of a conversation than the short time frame we've had because of state statute and laws that we have to pass our budget. So with that, I'm going to now go to Councilmember Chin.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree. Cuts are hard to make, and it's one that we need to take. We don't take this task lightly. I share some concerns with my council colleagues, especially with some of the fire department proposed cuts, the dive team as related to the Tempe Town Lake. And I'm concerned about a delay in bringing new ambulances online that could impact response times in an area that's an essential service for our community. I think it's important to point out that our budget process relies on performance measures, and I think our residents hear us say that and refer to those, but what that means is performance measures can be described as goals or intended outcomes that we have. All programs, services, and functions of all of our City of Tempe departments are tied to performance measures. That's how we create the budget. And that's when I believe Ken Jones mentioned that you don't just cut it, it has to make sense. Well, we know that there needs to be further discussion. More work needs to be done. There's been a call by our residents to review council priorities, which we would do with the new mayor and council coming in. There needs to be a systemic examination of what the priorities need to be and how we can modify the budget to reflect those adjustments to council priorities and performance measures. Now, accepting the initial budget adjustments tonight doesn't mean that the conversation about the budget ends. In fact, the bulk of the work lies ahead. And we as a council need to re-examine the priorities and direct staff to adjust performance measures accordingly. The months ahead, that task will need to be undertaken by the new mayor and council. I am confident that the new mayor and council will be willing to review priorities and performance measures. While I will not be participating in these discussions as a member of council, I am committed to participating as an involved member of our community. And I'd like to thank Ken Jones, Mark Day, and their teams for attempting to build a strong structure on shifting sand. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Chin. I just want to reiterate, so the purpose of what we're discussing tonight is getting consensus on the cuts that we have to make, and then also identifying those cuts for a future date with the new council for further discussion. And there's been a lot of things that are mentioned. And I'm going to turn to Ken Jones. Wait, Vice Mayor Kuby has her hand up.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to reiterate Councilmember Chin's remarks, but the way I look at this, the green, yellow, red, it's like it's a Jenga game, and it's been carefully constructed by staff. And Fire Medical Rescue came up with their list of suggested cuts that they could live with, the ones they could most live with. The ones in red, I don't think they have any yellow, but the ones in red are pretty much really cutting back on staff, right? So if this is what Fire Medical Rescue is recommending, and they're postponing the transfer to build out the ambulance space, it's not a cancellation, it's just postponing possibly for a year. I feel like we have to respect what Fire Medical Rescue said they could live with. And I just worry with this Jenga game, if we start moving it around, we're going to things will come crashing down. And that's what you said, Mr. Mayor, is just that we have to realize what else are we going to cut in its place. And I just would emphasize that I think human services are obviously paramount here. We don't know what crises we're going to be facing even in the next few months. So I'm most worried about human services, but I respect all the work that went into these cuts, and would like to support generally what we see here.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And right now, I just want to reiterate, we're looking for consensus, and Councilmember Keating mentioned that to cut what is proposed in green, but identify future conversations, and so we can move forward. Right now, we're just looking at cutting the $14 million. Is there a consensus to do what's in front of us?
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, Ken.
So Mayor, you don't have to get to the $14 million number tonight. We proposed $14 million. We've heard a lot of comments. I'll read back to you what I think I heard.
Okay.
And then we'll bring back to the city council at the next meeting a revised proposal based on us relooking at the things I'm about to mention. So code enforcement, I heard several comments that they would like us to look at that and see if we can not cut so deeply in code enforcement, concerns about that. The dive team, there seemed to be clear consensus that we want to look at if not completely eliminating the dive team, but possibly reducing it and looking at we can maintain some dive team there. Ambulance consensus that we want to look for some way to get those ambulances in service. It might not involve, and I know what the proposed cut was, is to delay the build out of the station that was going to host the ambulance service. So we'll work with the Fire Medical Rescue Department and say, are there other alternatives there where we can get ambulances in service and still postpone that or delay that? The beach park custodians, I heard a couple comments about that. And then AEDs, sounded like consensus on that. Code enforcement, the hearing officers, that goes along with the code enforcement and the notion that we want to make sure that we still have a viable process over in community development for those. I understand the recreation classes. What was said there was in those vulnerable neighborhoods where the recreation classes are absolutely necessary, go back and take a look and just make sure. And this doesn't mean we're going to eliminate that cut. What it means is we're going to come back to you with answers and say, what is the real impact on the community of that? And if we look at it and it looks like we can do something else that's less deep, then we'll look at that. Park cleaning, Kiwanis, we heard that removing Fridays may not be acceptable. We'll go back and look at that because I know the proposal was to move the closing time at Kiwanis from 10 p.m. to 9 p.m. and also remove Fridays from Kiwanis. And we'll give you a breakdown on the cost because we just gave you one total savings for all of that. We can come back to you and say, what's the savings for going from 10 to 9? What's the savings for removing Fridays? We can come back with more information on that. And then I'm going to mention a few things that Councilmember Adams mentioned that nobody else concurred with or said anything about. The training funds, the encampment cleanups, and the internal service preventative maintenance. Nobody else touched on those, but we can look at those and still come back with information. Now, we might come back and say, look, the departments have said postponing training for a year is the least impactful thing they can do for the community. We want people trained as much as you want people trained. None of these cuts are comfortable. We understand that. We have to pick the least uncomfortable of them. So we can come back with information on all of these. Some of them, based on the consensus that we heard, we will try to rearrange or try to revise them to satisfy what the council has said. Others, we might come back and just give you more information on. But we'll come back with a revised list. So I think you've done the work that we needed tonight by commenting on all of these. And all I would ask, Mayor, is that if you have any comments on the programs to revitalize the community or to address some of the most damaging COVID cuts, that $7 million in revitalization, did we have any comments on those? If that list of proposals sounded okay, then we'll just go forward with those.
Yeah. Those are good.
Mr. Mayor?
We have a
Mr.
whole
Mayor?
bunch of things up here, but just keep in mind what we have before us.
I have my hand up.
There's a lot of people having their hands up. So, was it Jennifer, then Vice Mayor Cubey?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. The only thing that, Ken, that I had mentioned that you did not mention was looking at the top-heavy organization, starting with City Hall. So
I'm sorry. Yeah, there were actually three things here that weren't on our list that were mentioned. I'm sorry, I forgot to get to those. You mentioned top heavy at City Hall, so that's not one of our proposed cuts, but it's a notion that you raised. And then also the revised contract with Sing Farms and the discussion of PD revisions. So those are three things that you brought up that you definitely want addressed. They just weren't proposed cuts that we had. So thank you for reminding me.
I just want to mention,
You're welcome.
I think there's consensus on that last one from Councilmember Adams on the top heavy side. All the other ones, I think, are pretty much consensus. Vice Mayor Kuby?
Yes, and I'm sorry, Councilmember Adams, I don't necessarily, I don't see, we could look at top heaviness in every department. I think part of what we need to do in looking at our operations is to just look at every department within the next year. I think we need to look deeply, but I don't know if it's City Hall that we're the fundamental target. I just want to ask Ken to reiterate something, because I heard from a lot of residents who are saying that human services are being cut. I heard someone say that Section 8 is being reduced by 190,000. If you look, it does say it's cut, but if you read more into it, you see that it's being made up from Aid CARES Act funds. So I think it's important to note that there's a lot of human service potential cuts, but they're being funded with grants for the next year. They're being, the homeless outreach specialists, it looks like we're removing it for 61,000. We are in one sense, but not in a real sense, because it'll be paid grants. Can you just elaborate on that human services, the backfill with some other aid besides the aid we're getting from the state?
Thank you, Lauren. That's a good point.
Yes, thank you, Vice Mayor. There are actually several of the proposed adjustments that aren't reductions. There are alternative funding sources. So if somebody said, we're going to get a grant to fund this for a year, then it's listed in there because it is a savings to the general fund, but it's not necessarily cutting that function. So there are several of those in human services. I think the total was about, I want to say about $150,000. That was just alternative funding. It wasn't really cutting any program or service. The same thing was true in sustainability. I think they were listed as having a large percentage of their budget adjusted. It was, I think, $20,000. Well, it actually was represented as $20,000 in new grant funding. So there are several, you have to really look into the details, which I know you all did and the public probably didn't have time to do. But we provided those links in the PDF so that people could click on each one of them and see the details. But you're absolutely correct. There are adjustments, they're net adjustments to the general fund. In some cases, they represent reductions. In some cases, they represent alternative funding. So thank you for that.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to respond to Vice Mayor Kuby, please.
Okay, Councilmember Adams.
Yes, what I am suggesting is top heavy throughout the entire organization, starting at City Hall. I by no means said that was limited to City Hall. So I want to put that out for clarification purposes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad you said that, Councilmember Adams, because you specifically said City Hall.
Starting at City Hall.
She did, Mayor. She said starting at City Hall, but whatever.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Councilmember Navarro for defending me. I appreciate it.
All right, Ken?
So Mayor, I think we have enough information to come back to you with a revised list in August. I'm just telling you, in order to make some of these restorations of some of the cuts that were proposed, we're probably going to have to look at some of those one-time funding of COVID recovery funds that we were proposing. We have to get closer to this number than we would if we took all of these out. So we're going to look at some of that COVID recovery funding that we're proposing and look a little more closely at that and see if we can whittle away at that some so that we can get a more balanced budget. So I think that's all we need, Mayor. If you're happy, I'm happy.
I think that's a good starting point for everyone. Is the council okay with what Ken just mentioned? Someone's on the phone. Someone needs to mute their phone. Thank you. Thank you, Lauren.
But Mr. Mayor, may I speak? I'm having a bit of conniptions here because you look at the COVID funding, it really is focused on social safety net, human services. It's focused on the most dire need. And that's what really concerns me. When I think about the green cuts, those are all cuts that each department said they could live with. And I feel like getting into the COVID aid and cutting away from that will go against the purpose of the COVID aid.
All right, Ken?
So Mayor, this is our balancing act. And if you have any stronger consensus that you feel you want to deliver to us, we're going to look at all of these. We won't necessarily, it's not going to be one for one for every dollar cut out of here. We're going to look at COVID aid. We're going to come back with some answers and some adjustments on some of them and not necessarily just remove them from the budget cuts. what we can't do at this point, and I really appreciate the way the city council members expressed themselves tonight, which is we don't know how far we're going to have to cut in the future. We know that this $14 million, let me just put it into perspective. We're recognizing a $55 million reduction in revenue, and we're only asking for cuts of $14 million because we have fund balance and other cash sources that we were able to offset and delay some of these cuts. So if things get better much faster than we think, then maybe the following year's cuts won't be necessary. I can almost guarantee you these cuts will be necessary regardless of what happens. So we can't stray too far from these targets. And if the council members think that some of the things that they mentioned tonight are invaluable programs and services that the community desperately needs, then maybe they're more valuable than the COVID recovery items that were pointed out. I'm not sure. We'll have to look more closely at it. So you'll have another chance, Vice Mayor Kuby, to comment. We're coming back with a revised list. You'll have plenty of chance to comment again. We aren't going to remove any budget from anybody until we get consensus.
Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and move forward with what's proposed, given the comments from council that has been made. If there's consensus with that, because we're going to have another opportunity to look at the budget and shift funds. Everybody's good with that?
Yes.
Hey, Mayor.
Yes,
Yeah.
Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just say something? Wait, my
Yes.
hand's been up for a while. I know you're tired of
Well,
me talking.
everybody's hands have been up for a while, and I don't know who's up first because they've been up. Everybody's left them up.
I've been up for a while.
Well,
Hey, it is kind of late, Joel, and I know you're old.
Down,
It's
is what I'm
11.
trying to tell you guys.
Yeah, go to bed, Joel. It's way past your bedtime. Hey,
Yeah.
Mayor, just really quick, I just want to tell Ken, I mean, he answered a lot of my questions, I think, moving forward, but I just want to reassure him that, at least from my comments and my perspective tonight, some of the things that I pointed out as they go back and readdress and look at those things, I don't expect them to completely remove it. I just expect there to be some more dialogue and discussion and, you know, maybe some adjustments if that's at all possible. And if it's not, I would just like to know why. That's all I get to. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds with the CARES money and how we can allocate that, because I think there's a lot of ways and that we could possibly use that to move forward. So I think we're good, and I certainly appreciate Ken trying to pull all of us together and pick out those things that, you know, he's heard. And I agree with the sentiments and some of the things that we can do outside of that, which is really look at the organization as a whole and making sure that we are being as efficient as we can, especially when it comes to management. You know, those are things that we should be doing anyway. So, you know, with that, I think Randy made a motion, you know, to move forward, and I'm more than happy to second it. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. All right, everybody okay moving forward, what has been discussed? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Mayor.
All right. With that, again, I want to thank everyone. It's been an honor serving with all of you. I want to thank you for your commitment and your leadership. And I wish you all well in the future. And see you guys on Saturday. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mayor. It's definitely been a privilege.
Mayor. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor.